Let's start. Hi. So let's start. So, hi, I'm Arthur. I'm a professor at the Barcelona Technology School as part of the Master of Big Data and AI for a course called Real-Time Data Analysis. And I'm also assisting BTS as part of some other initiatives. And as a um, for other initiatives, I'm also involved in my own startup to develop programs to help create data pipelines in the cloud, and also doing AI education as part of AI pathways with some colleagues. And the goal of that talk will be to talk about agentic AI for coding. And we have somebody here, Djoume Salvetti, who I'll let him introduce himself right after. But basically, our path crossed in the past when working as part of a Shopify. And Djoume has had a pretty long past in software development and leading teams. And maybe I can let him give more details, but basically it's a very nice opportunity to speak to him about that topic because he already went pretty deep into it. So Djoume, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. Thank you, Arthur. So I'm Djoume Salvetti. I am the co-founder of Fatna School, which is a non-profit that focuses on accelerating learning for learning of digital technologies for African youth. And yeah, like Arthur said, I have been in the software industry for I think close to 20 years now. First as a software developer, then as a manager, then as a director. So I've led small and large team. I've worked with like very different stacks. And actually before that, my first job was as a professor, just like Arthur, except it was in France at Polytech Sorbonne in Paris, where I was teaching electrical engineering, physics, and some computer programming as well. And the past 2 years have been very interesting because, I guess many people have been, trying to make use of AI and agentic AI specifically to build software, but also as part of the work I do with Fata School to build specifically educational software and generate exercise and yeah, I guess we'll get more into that soon.
Very good, very good. So long history with writing code. And your first quick impression, do you see AI having a big, medium, or not as big as people say impact in the field?
I would say all of the
So I guess.
above. Yeah,
Sorry?
all of them. Like
Yeah.
it is having a big impact, but there is also a lot of hype that is not like it doesn't map to reality. I think some of that is that in some very specific case, it really like is 1,000 times faster. But in many other cases, it doesn't change much the job of a software developer. So I think that's where a lot of the confusion comes from, is because sometimes you got that experience where it's like, wow, this took me 5 minutes. It would have taken me a week to do. And so like you're like, this is going to completely change the world. But this task is also just a very small subset of all the work that you do as a software developer. There is also like new type of work that you can tackle because of AI. So it's not just an accelerant; it's also like creates new opportunities for creating software in different ways, or to make the creation of software accessible to a lot of different people. Which just that in itself is a big change.
Cool. And then maybe to get back to the basic, a lot of people, so you said there is a lot of hype, a lot of people speak about agentic AI, and people seem to have different definitions, from what I see at least. And so I'm curious to know if you can share your own definition or how you see it.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, I mean, it's not really my own definition, but I would say I abide by like the definition that Anthropic, the company that does the Claude model, uh, which I think there is often people talk about agent, but then you look deeper, it's actually not an agent, it's just a workflow.
Yeah.
meaning the path is fixed, even though there is like many calls to an LLM, for instance. Like there is only a few branches, and it's like the the overall path is deterministic. To me, it's an agent when we start having a loop, and there is a step in the loop that define what to do next, and whether to continue or to exit the loop. For it to be an agent, there needs to be you uh, the agent needs to decide on its own which path to take and when to stop looping. And then the next level is to have the ability to like execute tools. So, but you don't need the tools necessarily to be an agent. Like you can have like one tool which is like call an LLM, but then you can augment the agent and make it a lot more useful when you give it access to tools such as, you know, executing code, doing web search, etc.
Okay, that's interesting. Like, for me, there is also something else um, that is required to classify something like an agent. It needs to not only read information maybe from different sources, but also to act in some environment. So it could be like to trigger some action in some system, to send emails, write some code, and then also interact with a terminal to be able to execute that code and do a loop there. So maybe that's the loop that you're talking about. But in my head, something that some people classify agentic AI that I don't really see as agentic AI or are systems that read information by different sources and maybe help you summarize and things like this, but don't necessarily act. So to me, the act or like the writing part, read write,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
is part of this. I don't
I
know if
think that's fair. And so for you, would you call like something like Notebook LLM an agent? So that's like an AI product that's gonna
not
go
really
make some
actually.
search and then generate
Yeah.
a report. For you, that's not an agent because it doesn't like act on the word. It just produce a report. Doesn't actually buy something or trigger a
Yeah.
request. Got it. Yeah, yeah,
Or for example, there is one system that got pretty popular lately, Manus AI
yeah.
uh, from
Mm.
China. I tried it and I thought it is very powerful. It's very impressive. But to me, I don't see it really as agentic AI, even though everybody speaks about it as agentic AI, because I don't see it acting on my behalf on some third-party systems. But it's to me, I see it more like as a deep research kind of tool
Got
that
it.
very good at collecting information from different sources. And when it comes to, let's say, agentic AI for computing, for coding, maybe can we list different systems that we've heard about, or and maybe you can start that are kind of popular in that space. Let's say agentic AI for coding.
For sure. Yeah. So maybe let's start with some tools that are not agent, but that can integrate. So like Cursor,
Yeah,
VS Code, Windsurf, Klein, all of those like editor are very popular and they give you the ability to access like an agent in addition to other things. So like you've got the very smart autocomplete. That's like, let's say level one.
yeah,
Then you've got like the ability to chat with the agent to ask it question about the code. Maybe that's level two. Then you can ask it to like make change to the code. So I think of this as like autocomplete across many files, which is like extremely valuable. And then there is like another level, which is you just give it a link to let's say a GitHub issue, and it's gonna read the issue. It's going to generate like a series of change, open a PR, maybe review the PR, and potentially even merge the PR after all the tests have passed. So and so this all of this workflow can be integrated into kind of any IDE. Uh, for me, I use NeoVim. I'm a old timer, and so the tool that works best for me are like so Copilot integrate like the autocomplete, and also I use Cloud Code because it's a CLI tool, and so it integrates well with NeoVim to access the rest, like to ask question about the code, to generate pull requests from specification as well as a tool called CodeRabbit. So CodeRabbit is a code review tool, So whenever I open a pull request on GitHub, CodeRabbit is going to generate some documentation, some diagram, analyze the source, and make some suggestion or recommendation, and decide whether or not it should be merged. You can always override it, of course. So that combination of Cloud Code and CodeRabbit and autocomplete, like those three elements, it's what has had the biggest impact on my software development lifecycle. I would say more than the ability to like query the code base but that also I think depends on your use case. I'm building something that is relatively new. I don't have a huge legacy code base to deal with on my day to day, but that's probably why I don't leverage as much the questioning the state of a code base aspect.
So maybe like for people that are not familiar, when you're speaking about NeoVim, you're speaking about basically a terminal-based tool. So basically, you do all of your workflow is within the terminal, but within the terminal, you interact with Claude to be able to change some
Yeah,
of your code and things like this. Is that correct?
that is correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So either I'm like, I will start typing something, and then there will be like autocomplete, a suggestion for like, if I type like the name of a function, a Copilot is going to suggest like the implementation of a function, and I can just tab to accept it. Or with Claude, I have like a window within NeoVim where I will ask it, like this morning, I asked it like, follow the pattern of this file to implement another instance of this, and then it will go through the work. It will like ask me permission as needed, propose some change. I can accept, reject. I can give it more instruction. I can like drop into like manual mode if needed, and then I can ask it to like run some commands such as like create a PR. Generate a script that is going to migrate some data, whatever. Yeah.
Cool. And one more thing you were saying before that I didn't quantify it that way, but I think it's pretty nice. You were speaking about level one, level two, level three, level one being like autocomplete, level two or the three, and then all the way to level four, where the system would just take a GitHub issue and go and fix it essentially.
Yeah.
And that sounds a bit like what you hear about in the automotive industry for autonomous vehicles. They're actually speak
Right.
about level 1 to 4 in terms of how much it helps you with like level 4 actually also being like full
Full self-driving. Yeah.
self-driving. And in that case, where do you think we are, or where is the industry? And
Yeah, yeah. So I remember last year, like this time last year, it was like level one, and I was pairing with my friend Mercy, and it was just I was blown away because I would start typing something, and it looked like it could read my mind. It was just amazing. And when you get used to it, it just become normal, and you only notice it when you're offline, and you're like, I can't type doesn't work. I can't work anymore. You realize how much you grow to depend on that. So level two really came, I would say, with Cursor. Uh, but for me, it was really Claude Code, which was released earlier this year, I would say January, that really enabled me to leverage an AI that can. Sorry, I'm talking about level three already. Level
yeah,
two is you just it's like ChatGPT, except that you have it integrated in your IDE. You ask it question about your code, it generates some code. You maybe copy paste it into your editor, or if your editor is like Cursor, it will
yeah,
make the diff there.
yeah,
Um, Level three is where you don't have to write like a detailed prompt. You don't have to give like very specific instruction. It really is an agent now. So you can give it something vague. He's going to think, he's going to build a plan, he's going to like run some command. So it's going to analyze. You don't have to give it like which file to change. It's going to, okay, he would say like, let me search for all the file that looks like they could be relevant. He's going to read those files. Um, it might like write a script or write a bash command, to find what is relevant. And then he's going to make the change. And then it can like go all the way to like opening up a pull request by writing the description, all of those things for you. Um, and the next level is you just,
So
move
you mean
something on your GitHub board to like ready, and the agent picks it up, does its work, and then all the way to like merging the code. So we are not at level 4 today, except for like some very simplistic task. Like if it's a very simple task, you can do that today. But as soon as there is a little bit of complexity, you need close human supervision, or you're gonna, it's gonna merge code, but it's going to be uh, like you're gonna hit a wall very quickly. Like the technical debt is gonna increase drastically, and at one point, it won't be able to change the code anymore because it's just such a big mess, like lots of duplication, lots of inconsistency. It might have pulled some library you don't want, some dependency that he has hallucinated, etc. Yeah.
it, I heard about some studies that try to analyze the quality of code, and that said that over the last maybe 2 years or so, maybe the number of bugs per unit of code actually increased, and people kind of blame maybe vibe coding for that.
Mhm.
I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I have experienced it myself because it's now a lot faster to write code, and it's very tempting to just keep going uh, and not refactor, not pay close attention to what is being written, even if like all the tests pass, all the static analysis pass. The code might still have some hidden bomb. Like I remember, I think it was last year, watching a video, like an official video from Microsoft about Copilot and how it could like complete code for you, and they were like prompting it to I think read a CSV file for some data analysis, and they were parsing like the numbers as float. And I was like, don't do this. You should be using decimals because you're gonna have some, if you're going to do it. It was like a financial use case, but this was the official video of Copilot and how great it is. And I think this is typical because it looks right. You probably don't have tests that are going to fail yet, but that's like a bug that is going to explode, 6 months from now, and you're gonna have to have like off by one error, so. We need the close supervision for those type of bugs, like the subtle performance, scalability, security issue or correctness issue, and also you need a close supervision for the overall architecture. Like, uh, like the first week I started using Claude with Adam, the developer I was pairing with. Like we wrote so much code that it felt so productive, and we got to the thing we wanted. Like the product was like the functionality was implemented. But then I needed another week just to reorganize the code properly to like remove a bunch of duplication and inconsistency. And it would have been very easy to not do that, but then productivity would have like tanked very very quickly. So they don't know like the big picture. They don't. Sometimes they know some patterns, but like they don't know like which one you want to implement, or they can't foresee the thing that are only in your head. So like this week, for instance, I'm focusing on just reducing the technical debt by like reorganizing the code that AI has been producing over the past 2 weeks, because I know that I won't be able to get to the next level, to the next step efficiently if I don't do it now.
Oh, okay, interesting, interesting. And actually, recently, kind of on the same theme, there were some talks from the CEO of Anthropic, because you spoke about Claude before, saying that maybe expect that within 6 months, you may have heard that too, within
Yeah,
six
yeah.
months, they expect that maybe about 90% of code would be generated by AI agents. I'm just wondering if you have any opinions,
Yeah,
or how do you
yeah,
see that
yeah.
in the future?
So I think this is probably true, but it's not what we think it means. It doesn't mean,
Yeah.
if we had like a million developer, now 90% of them are going to be out of work because AI have replaced them. That's not what it means. What it means is now, instead of a million developer, we have a billion developer, and most of them are just AI agent. A lot of the code that is generated now is throwaway code. People go use one of those like AI app builder that generate a whole bunch of code super quickly, but then it's not like it's throwaway. Even me, like I rarely accept the code right away. So to make a 100 line change, I'm probably going to generate 500 lines. Uh, and so like most of the code will be generated by AI, but I will only accept a small fraction of that. So uh, I think this is actually like a great time for developers. I don't think it's going to like reduce the demand. I think it's going to increase the demand because it makes it possible now for more people to get started, to get to the point where they've built some momentum. And I think some businesses will get started this way, or some businesses are being started this way, I should say. And some people will get into development just like that. A bit like when maybe with Shopify, it makes it Shopify makes it a lot easier to get an online store going. And as a result, there's a lot more people that try. Most of them are not going to succeed, but more than before are going to succeed. And so there will be more online businesses as a result of a company like Shopify. With AI coding agent, there will be more developers as a result of that. And there will be a lot more code produced, just like there is a lot more websites that have been generated thanks to like WordPress. Um, but does that mean there is less of a need for web developer today? Yeah.
Okay, no, good, good, interesting. And you're speaking about the thing where it's good at and maybe less good at. Maybe can you give some examples on where it can speed up your task a lot and maybe where it's not as good?
Yeah. I would say where I've seen the biggest speed up would be like migration-like task. So either you're like adopting a new framework or you need to repeat a change. So for instance, if you want to introduce a new pattern, before it will be like a very long, you might have to open like 50 PRs over the course of, 2 months to slowly chip away at the code to reorganize it. Now you can do this in like a week or maybe a day because the AI is very good at like repeating something that is like kind of similar. So if you give it a pattern, you say, I want to do that now, but across all of those other uh, package or module, that's a huge time saver. Um, Another key use case is anything that is around prototyping or area where like you just want to see if this is going to work. So uh, if you have an idea, like I wonder if using this other framework would be better. With AI, you can very quickly get an implementation that is, let's say, 80% or 90% correct, which is enough to give you the information that you need to decide whether or not to pursue this. Or if you generate an app from scratch, like like the early days are much faster now than before. Um, so I would say those would be an example of where the AI is very good. In some case, debugging will be better. Like sometimes you just say like you can ask, let's say Claude, like run the test. It will run the test will fail, and then it will try to fix them. And I would say 50% to 80% of the time, it can do like reasonable fix. But then there is, 20% of the time where it's just going to like delete the test. Now the tests are passing, or like do some way, like figure out a way to make the test pass, but it's
Ask,
not
yeah.
actually helpful. So that's not super helpful. Anything that is uh, like the front end changes that are not like I want to build the first version of a web page, but I want to make a small change, and there are some subtlety to think about, like it needs to be a responsive design, or I there is like a complex UX interaction. I haven't found helpful there. Usually much faster to do it by hand. Also, when the AI start taking the wrong path, like if after two like course correction, it's still going down the wrong path, I've learned that I shouldn't keep trying to like coerce it into doing the right thing. I should just either start with a completely different prompt, or I should just do it like it's time to do it myself. Yeah.
Nice, nice. And in terms of the level of complexity that it can tackle, like I see it as very dependent on how much context it can take or how well it takes the context.
Yeah.
And do you see some kind of pattern there, or like let's say a size of the of repository where it would say after that, well, maybe it's giving you recommendation that doesn't take into account the full scope of the repository, or how do you manage that?
So in terms of like size of a repository or like a set of like a pattern or policy, as far as I can tell, it's a matter of like using the right tool and giving it the right context. So with Cursor, you can write rules file. With Claude, you can also give it instruction. Like you can all of those tools, you can give them the right context in terms of like we use this type of pattern, we use those frameworks, don't do this, only do that, etc. That will be automatically loaded into their memory, and so they are pretty good at following those instructions. They are not always good at inferring what the rules or patterns are. Similarly, for like the size of a repository, uh, I I haven't experienced this issue myself. As far as I can tell, like if you use the right tool, so like Gemini has a much bigger context window than
With
Claude.
a
So
million
maybe
token, no? I
was that
think,
right?
isn't that a million token for
That's
the,
right. Yeah.
yeah. So I
So
think
there's
a million token, I think they say it's the equivalent of a book of about 1,000 pages or so. So it probably fits a pretty big program in there.
yeah repository and other tool like Augment Code is another tool that is like specialized in like large repository. I've been also impressed with like Code Rabbit ability to deal with like very large PR. Like here is a 20,000 line change, and it has no problem with that. But you do need, there is something to be said about like how you configure the tool, how you give it instruction. Like, and as soon as you have like a more complex code base, like a more complex code base, the more important it is to guide it properly. If you have like a mono repository with like many different program and maybe the pattern are inconsistent between them, all of that you need to describe in your documentation. One good thing is that it can read the README, just as well
Yeah.
as we can. So hopefully you already have some documentation for humans and you can just point it at that. If not, maybe it's a good time. It can also generate some of that documentation for you, which has been very handy.
For me, I'm starting to do better readmes, not so much for me, but for actually the
That's
yeah.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one thing I really appreciated is how much more explicit it forces us to be. Like even in our prompt, you're like, what is it that I actually want? Like now I have to like write it down, and as a result, like my thinking improves because by writing it down, I realize actually this is not exactly that. Like the thinking is clarified. Same thing with the documentation. You write a documentation, you realize, actually this doesn't make sense now that I see it when I try to explain it or describe it.
Nice, nice. And like, do you see something missing, or like for me, I guess what I would like to see is better control over that context, like better knowing what context do you have. Uh, but I'm
Mhm.
curious to know if you see the same thing, or if you have other things that you think would help make the experience better,
Um,
apart from going to that level 4 that you mentioned before.
yeah, but even the level 4, I don't know if it's realistic because again, uh, they can infer intent, but they cannot read mind. So
Mm.
if you just say like, make me an app that does this, there is a million way to implement it. Unless it's like, make me a clone of something that is very that the AI knows already. Um, I would say for me sometimes like maybe the cost gets out of control. I don't have a good sense of like how much is this going to cost?
Yeah,
Because sometimes it can be significant. Like I've already spent, $30 for the US dollar on one big refactoring. If I'd known beforehand, I would still have done it. Was definitely worth it. But sometimes I would do something and it would cost me $1, and I would be like, that was just a waste. Because you get lazy, I ask it to make a PR, right, run the test, etc. But like he has to read all of this input token, I have to see the result of the test, etc. So um, I think there's something to be said about like being more like time and cost efficient because also sometimes it takes longer to do it through the AI than to just press
yeah.
the run the test button. as an example. That there's that. Also, making it easier uh, to adjust its learning. So one feature I really like about CodeRabbit is when CodeRabbit does a code review. Sometimes it would say, "Oh, this needs to be this way," but it's wrong because it doesn't know better. And if you just respond to it on GitHub, you say, "No, actually, this is how we do it." CodeRabbit will be like, "Okay, thank you. I have recorded it in my learning, and from now on, all the future code review, it will have this in its memory." So it's very easy to build over time, like a comprehensive set of rules without having to like upfront trying to think about them all or having to maintain a particular file. Like the agent learns every time it reviews code and you interact with it. And I would love to see this like better integrated into like the day-to-day flow. I know that now CodeRabbit can integrates with like directly into the code editor, like into VS Code, etc. So I'm not sure what the experience is for like teaching it new learnings there.
Okay. But for you, you would want it inside the terminal, right?
Yes, of course. I mean, where
Yeah.
else?
And maybe as a last question, to open it to a broader discussion, maybe for later, but like the impact that you can see on like the training side, the hiring side, like the marketplace
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
developers. I'm curious to know.
So let's start with like training. So it's a tool that maybe like YouTube. There is some really good stuff on YouTube for learning. I would say my kids they learn more from YouTube than from school these days. But there is also a lot of way to waste time. YouTube short, anyone? So that's like that can be dangerous. That can actually depress learning. And so this AI tool, they can work both ways. So it can be really helpful to get answer quickly, to get quick feedback, which is essential for learning. But also, it can give you the answer before you got a chance to think about it. And as a result, you won't remember it. You won't like adjust your neural pathway. So therefore, you won't learn. Um, so I would say when it comes to like education, at school, we have to be very careful how we use it. A bit like how we use calculator. When you're in math, it's not like we give you a calculator in grade one and that's how you learn math. No, there are times where you should not be using your calculator because you won't learn how to do mental math. And if you don't know how to do mental math, it's going to affect your ability to do, data science later just to quickly see an order of magnitude is correct on that, whatever. But there's also a time where you want to use the calculator because it gives you access to like some higher level math that would be, nearly impossible to deal with if you didn't have a calculator. So um, we have to be intentional and strategic in terms of where you introduce those AI tools in schools and in university. For professionals, same thing. We have to make sure we are intentional about how we keep learning and we stay sharp, even though we are using those AI tools. Like you can lose your, muscle memory, your habits of like solving problem if you over depend on those tools. So I think there will be a new set of training tools that can compensate for that, but leverage AI for a purpose of training as opposed for a purpose of like getting something done without learning it. And when now it comes to recruitment and hiring, I think it's been a long time that those trick question of let's reverse a linked list on a whiteboard haven't been a good predictor for success on the job. But now definitely, I think if I want to hire someone, I would hire them by giving them all the tools to make it as realistic as possible, meaning as the real situation is. And what's interesting is to see how they use the tools, how they think critically, like uh, how they ask question, etc. So those are the real skills to assess, as opposed to do you know this particular trick. So I think this is going to affect how a company think about hiring. Not that it will be they can now hire like more junior developer than before because we have this AI tool, or like they can not hire junior developer. Like I don't think either is going to be correct. But in terms of we can better assess future job performance because it removes some noise from the interview system, so or interview
And
process.
yeah, interesting. And like for me, something that I've heard too that seems like interesting answer to the question of education and training for younger people that want to get into that is the fact that more and more, like, or let's say in the past, junior people would learn by seeing more senior people asking, like giving them tasks because they feel they don't have time,
Hmm.
or they use that as an opportunity, and it's things that are needed for the work. And so the junior person is trained by taking those kind of tasks by the more senior person. Um, but one of the issue that some people reported related to the use of LLMs is the fact that then the senior person is less likely now has an easier way to deal with those kind of lower level tasks and have them automated by AI. And then that leaves maybe less room for the junior person to actually be trained. And so it may create a gap. So I don't know how
Yeah,
it's going to unfold, but that was an interesting opinion that I heard on the topic.
yeah, I think this is a fair point, but and there is also the other side too, which is now more people are going to get to something useful. They're gonna realize that they can build something. They're gonna get more positive feedback. They can get the answer uh, faster. Like when I grew up, when I was learning code, I remember I was the like there was one other person in like a 50-kilometer neighborhood that I knew that was also programming. And to learn to code Pascal, I had to ask like my aunt to buy a book at the library in Paris and ship it to me, and then I would read the book. And any question, I was on my own. There was no internet. It was a lot slower
Yeah.
than today, or even like before AI. So I think AI can like the fact that you can get answer to your question quickly, get faster feedback, build momentum, an interest. All of that is valuable, and there are the risk of like uh, you also need to do a lot of product. You need to do the hard thinking yourself sometimes to be able to learn things. Yeah.
Oh, thanks. And then maybe actually we've already passed time a bit, but we'd like to take the opportunity to take a few questions. And I know we already have some questions, so I'm gonna shoot them to you. For example, one of them is how to deal with sensitive data in agent coding style.
Yeah. So I think there is maybe like a few ways I can understand this question. So one is how do you make sure the code that you produce is going to be like secure and like won't leak the sensitive data. Another way is like how do you
Yeah,
still use
access
a
your
coding
code.
agent without giving, the company that are building those agent like access to your sensitive data.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm not sure which one it is.
I'm actually not sure, but to me, the one that would come to mind was like if you don't want to necessarily give access to your code to some of those third-party systems that may then have access to your proprietary
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
code. Yeah,
Yeah, so local LLM are only getting better, and I think like the edge model, like the model from Google, OpenAI, Anthropic, they only have a small lead that close usually within like a few months. So and being a few months behind is actually not a problem, because there is a lot of issue with like being on the leading edge as well. Like there's a lot of time wasted doing things that are going to disappear, or you have to deal with like early version of stuff.
yeah.
So
So in that case, you're speaking about running a local model on your laptop?
that's right, either on your laptop or on your like proprietary server,
Yes. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
your own, like your company server. So something like Llama, a Llama model or a Gemini, like all of those models that you can host, and this way you don't give access to any other company. Also, there's a lot more open source. Like Microsoft announced this week that they were going to open source Copilot, like the client side. Uh, there is like Adder is a fully open source
GPT.
version of Claude, etc. So
Yeah.
the trend, I think, is pretty clear. And so for that, it does mean there is a trade-off, like always. So you can't use more recent models, but you can get some pretty good um, agentic coding by running it like locally being on your laptop or on your like local server.
And so locally, that would be, for example, so using something like Olama.
That's
Like
right.
I've used it, but I wasn't sure. I haven't tried it for coding, and I'm not sure that it's at least with a like MacBook Air, not very powerful laptop. I wasn't sure that it was performant enough to be able to really help. Actually, I felt like it was too slow, and I could only run like a 7B model, 7 billion parameters.
Yeah,
And so my impression is that for running locally, you had to have like a pretty serious laptop already. But it's true that you can also use it on the cloud. And on the cloud, for example, in AWS, you have AWS Bedrock that you can use to have your own open source model running in your account where you have full control. And so in that case, you don't have to share your code with anybody. Or
exactly. Yeah,
AWS, but at least you can be fairly confident that that it stays within your AWS environment.
exactly. Yeah,
Okay.
totally.
And I see some other question about assessing performance using AI as a tool only. Let me see. Is assessing performance using AI as a tool only? How to prompt? I'm trying to understand the
Yeah,
questions.
yeah. So how to write prompt for the AI? I think I
Yes. Okay.
understand.
Yeah.
I would say actually this is not important. I don't think this is actually I mean, the there is some like basics about how to prompt model, but especially with thinking model now, like the quality of your prompt, like the value of the quality of your prompt has diminished considerably. Like you don't need to do uh, all the trick about like thinking step and make sure you put this in front. Like there is some optimization, there is something there, but it's not as important now. Uh, to me, assessing performance using AI, this is like a tiny portion uh, of it. It has a lot more to do with, how you would assess performance using Stack Overflow. So like that's what back in the days when Arthur and I were at Shopify, that's one of the things we were looking at during interview. People could use Google, but would they just like copy paste the first answer, or would they have a critical look at it? So that's another example. Also, knowing when to so like if you're building a small application uh, as part of your like a interview process, for instance, uh, are you just building on top of like whatever you built before and you keep going, or do you say, all right, I see this new requirement now. Uh, Before implementing it, I want to do some reorganization. I want to do some refactoring. I want to introduce some architecture, you know, like being able to do that. And then, of course, what we talked about before, like, are you able to catch the small inconsistencies, the small bugs? Like, the reason why AI is not like a complete revolution of software development is because AI is really good at writing code, but most of the work is about either understanding the problem you're trying to solve or reading the code and understanding what is it that you have right now. So that's I would say that's 80% of the work. So AI affect mostly like 20%. It makes a big difference on those 20%, but it's only 20%. um Hopefully that answer the question. uh that it says about assessing performance, so I wonder if it's also about like not just for hiring but like on the job. uh so I like,
Actually,
yeah.
like yeah, for me, I have a question that I've heard about several times that's related to that. I think, like, do you see some kind of, can we quantify some kind of ROI on using those tools? Like I've heard some teams saying that, or some studies that said that developers may be like 70% more productive. I've heard
Yeah.
some teams telling me, oh, we think it's like 4x more productive because they say now like things that used to take me a month now I can do it in 1 week with my team. But I find it pretty hard to quantify. I don't know if you have any
Yeah,
idea.
I'm very confident it's not 4x.
Okay.
I mean, it will be, we'll see it, all right? Like, it will be obvious, It's not like OpenAI is moving 4x faster than, the rest of the world on their software. We see that software, we see the quality of ChatGPT that is coming out, and I use OpenAI, but I can use any other company. Uh, it's not 4x for sure. It's not even 70%. Um, My experience, I would say it's more like in the 10 to 20%, but it's highly dependent on the task. For some tasks, it is literally like 10x or 100x. That is true. Uh, and for a lot of other tasks, it doesn't change anything. Like when I think of like technical design, okay, maybe it doesn't change anything is too strong. It doesn't make a material change. Like you can do some analysis of the existing code base faster. You can do some, research a bit faster. But really, like, the bulk of the time is not going to be affected by that. Uh, and what we were talking about earlier, like in terms of like understanding what is it that you should be building, what is the problem you're trying to solve, like those are things that are. Uh, it's a bit like when I think of data science. Uh, Implementing the model is actually a tiny portion. A lot of it is like, oh, you have to deal with this data. You have to clean the data. You have to understand what is relevant in the data. Uh, there's like my guess would be like 80% of the work that you would do, Arthur, is not about like importing scikit-learn and
And doing
running
it.
a model against the data. This is like a tiny
Function.
portion of it.
Very good. I think we'll wrap it up there. Thanks a lot. Maybe like, is there to close it, like some things that you're looking forward in the next weeks or months that you've heard are kind of coming or that you're expecting that you find
Yeah,
interesting that you're looking forward to?
I'm really excited about like a company like OpenAI, Microsoft, like Google doing more open source and having like less siloed development. I think that's going to be very interesting to see how Copilot has been implemented and to see how like the good ideas are going to be taken by the open source community and spread around. So I think that's pretty exciting to see, as well as the smaller model. I think are going to be like today. You need like this giant data center, all of this memory. I look forward to being able to run like
On the
all of
laptop?
it like locally with like very small latency. So we'll
Hey,
see.
nice. Well, thanks a lot for the conversation, Djoume.
Thanks for having me, Arthur. It was a
Thank you
pleasure.
very much. See you. Bye bye.
Yeah, talk later. Bye.